Hello and welcome to the second installment of my grading of all of the expansion cards in Terraforming Mars. Today is the first episode about Venus Next. First of all, some of you might ask how I will rank these cards and how the base game cards compare to them. To answer the first question, I will rank the Venus Next cards with the same old rating system that you can find in the description and that was explained in the first episode of rating base game cards. And also, I will create separate tier lists for all expansions. And these tier lists will for now only include the project cards that are introduced with that specific expansion. At some later point I will fill these tier lists with the base game cards as well, and that brings me to my next point. I will not talk about the impact that Venus Next has on the base game project cards in this video. As I said, I'll do that in a later one. But as always, if you want insight into the grading system, check out the description or click on the link in the top right hand corner to get to the first video, where I explain it all. But let's get started. You might already know my opinion on the average card quality in the Venus Next deck. I think the project cards of this expansion are not great overall. But funnily enough, the first episode has 3 bangers. The first one is Aerial Mappers, which is a great early game card draw. It's somewhat comparable to Death Center and Restricted Area, since both cost roughly the same and have no restrictions to play. It's slower than both, since it only draws a card every other gen, but in exchange it's much cheaper, since with Death Center you need to pay for the power, and with Restricted Area you need to pay for each activation. Also, Aerial Mappers grants a point and exchanges the Science tag for a Venus tag. I consider the Venus tag to be weaker, but at least Venophile is always active, while Scientist is only in play on Tharsis. And one last thing, theoretically you can use it to put floaters on other cards, but drawing cards is better than most other floater card effects most of the time. So the situations in which you will be doing that are limited. I think I like Aerial Mappers roughly as much as Death Center, but less than Restricted Area, since that one combines the most card draw with more utility through its tile placement. So I think Aerial Mappers is either high B tier or low A tier, but I'm going to settle for B tier. Not all cards this episode are as consistent as Aerial Mappers, and Aerosport Tournament is a perfect example for that. This card depends on 2 factors that can vary wildly. Firstly, you will need 5 floaters on cards to play this. While there are some good floater cards in Venus Next, like Floating Habs, there are also many bad ones, like Forced Precipitation or Extractor Balloons. Also, with some of the good ones, you do not want to collect a ton of floaters, but instead use them. For example, with the just discussed Aerial Mappers or Deuterium Export. So 5 floaters can be hard to reach, and some strategies just will never get there. For example, you won't play a single floater card if you're rushing with Ecoline, like ever. And then the payout of this card depends on the amount of cities placed. Especially in 2P games, there is a solid possibility that there won't be more than 5 cities down at the end of the game. This can of course also vary wildly, but importantly, placing a lot of cities does not really correspond with playing floater cards, so both factors that influence this card are independent, making this card even worse. Of course, there are definitely situations where you draw this in the late game and it can pay back more than you pay for it, especially if you have Media Group or you're playing Vitor. But I would almost never pick this up if both factors were not already working in its favor. So all in all, I would probably put this in D tier. Another mediocre card is coming our way with Air Scrapping Expedition. The main problem I got with this card is, once again, it relies on too many factors to be actually decent. You need to have a use for the 3 floaters, and you need to actually want to increase Venus. For example, because you have Venusian animals on hand. Most of the time, at least one of these factors won't be fulfilled. In the best case scenario, where you have an actual top tier floater card like Floating Habs on hand, Air Scrapping Expedition would grant 2.5 points, and then be alright. Not great, but alright. Some other factors like Venus discounts, Hoverlord or Media Group could make it better, but if you don't have a high requirement Venus card and no combo potential, then playing this card is super underwhelming. And herein lies the problem. There aren't enough top tier floater cards and high requirement Venus cards in the deck for Air Scrapping Expedition to be regularly good. Therefore, I will put this card in D tier. But let's get back to better cards, and next we will talk about one of my absolute favorites, Atalanta Planitia Lab. This science payoff is very similar to research, costing only 1 MC less, granting 1 more point, and exchanging 1 science tag for Venus tag. So is Atalanta better or worse than research? Obviously, the restriction hurts. Research is often not just an engine card, but a possibility even for rush players to draw out of a bad start. That's not the case with Atalanta, and also, due to the restriction, it can't be used to unlock AI, which is one of the absolute strengths of research. I think not having 2 science tags is also a weakness compared to research in general. Sure, the Venus tag can also combo with other cards, and in contrast to Scientist, Venophile is active on all maps. But the science tag is just stronger, with insane on-play effects like Marzu and crazy high restriction cards like the aforementioned AI or AGT. In general, I'd say research is more of a jack of all trades, which really helps get your science combo going, while Atalanta is more of a late game payoff with its restriction and the additional point. I would place Atalanta still in the same tier in which I placed research originally, so the A tier. And lastly, we get to Atmoscoop. This card is just great value, with some added flexibility and a bit of extra combo potential in 2 different ways. Firstly, 2 points in a TR for 22 MC are already an alright deal, especially if you can pay for it with titanium. ICS, for example, grants 4 points for 24 MC and sees quite a bit of play, also because it has quite a bit of combo potential, but you'll see that Atmoscoop is not lacking in that either. The first part of its combo potential are floaters. If your floating haps down, you actually get 4 points out of this card. But there are other alright targets like aerial mappers or deuterium export. Then Atmoscoop also holds a Jovian tag, which of course can mean more points. And lastly, the flexibility it offers between increasing the Venus or the temperature is great. With the science requirement, the Jovian tag and the floaters, Atmoscoop really is an engine payoff for the late game, so Venus is often what you take, but if you're in a point lead already and can close out the game, or if you want to steal the bonus ocean, the temperature bumps are super useful to have as an option. I would put Atmoscoop in A tier, even though it has a 3 science requirement. Thanks so much for watching. Let me know in the comments whether you agree with my ratings, or if not, how you would have rated these cards differently. Also, if you enjoyed the video, please leave a like and consider subscribing. And lastly, please check out my Twitch and my Twitter. See you in the next video.